It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin on the platform. Brought to you by One New Zealand. Let's get connected.
Geoff Parkes is from the Raw Melbourne. We met formally last year at the World Cup, sitting beside each other throughout that Rugby World Cup, the quarters and semis and finals. And you've been a great mate and a great contributor to the show since. And so this is our second to last show. And I just wanted to say thank you before we do anything else, Geoff. It's been a pleasure, mate.
No, the pleasure's all mine, Marty. So, as we spoke last time, on to better and bigger things for you, hopefully. And it's a pleasure being able to join you and your listeners.
October 29th is when the book was going to come out, but now you might have another chapter to write, a year in the life and death of the Melbourne Rebels, because here we go, a $30 million court case. I can't see how this ends well, except if you're working on the lawyer's side for each side.
Funnily enough, a lot of the work on the Rebels side is pro bono, not all of it, but so they've got a little bit of an advantage there because one of the directors who's at the centre of all of this is one of Melbourne's leading King's counsels. So, they have been able to work away in the background in their position without racking up huge legal bills because, one of their own guys is covering that. But they won't be able to do that forever, of course. And no, these cases, they never really end well. As you say, it becomes a lawyer's picnic. And you'd have to say it's just to get to this point where it is going to go to court or it's going to be settled beforehand at great cost to somebody. That's a failure of leadership just to allow that to happen.
Agreed.
And there's this should have been sorted out a long, long time ago. And I know Rugby Australia, it's a difficult environment for them. They don't have any money. They're getting it in the neck from New Zealand about performance in Super Rugby for years and years, and you have to cut teams. And so, Marty, a lot of this current situation goes back to 2017 when they did cut a team, and there was a lot of pain at the time, and the Western Force were cut from Super Rugby, and New Zealand were happy with that Australia had dropped down to 4 teams, and everybody in Australia felt as tough as that was for the Force that the number was, about right, and it was what the game could afford. And what happened was that COVID separated New Zealand and Australia. They had to run their own competitions, and so the Force were brought back in because Rugby Australia needed an extra team to have enough games. And then suddenly they're back to 5 teams. They've got less money coming out of COVID than what they've had before. The TV rights are dropping, not going up. The performances aren't really getting any better. They've got gradually a bit better, but still not to the point where, New Zealand teams are routinely losing to Australia. So the pressure came back on to say, right, well, we had 4 teams, that was the right number. We've now got 5, we've got to go back to 4. And it just happens to be, if you're looking at a game of musical chairs, the Rebels at the time, at the end of last year, were in the relatively weakest position of the 4 teams financially. Rugby Australia's then decided, right, we have an opportunity to act here, and then the whole thing's just snowballed. And probably, there's a whole lot of detail in this that we can't cover just in a short chat, and a lot of it is in my book. But, a lot of it is a lack of communication of 2 sides sort of taking up camp and not talking to each other. There's not the same relationships in rugby that there used to be. There's not even the same sort of rugby people in administration that there used to be. There's a lot of consultants and accountants and things like that. So when you don't have those strong relationships, you aren't able to sort stuff out in the back room. And so, everyone took their position. A few things that Rugby Australia thought would happen didn't happen. They maybe thought the Rebels would go into liquidation and they'd be out of the competition even before the start of the year. And that didn't happen. And as things have gone on, even though they were eventually terminated, there's been a fierce determination here amongst the directors and rugby people in Melbourne that this shouldn't be the end of rugby in Melbourne. And so it's no surprise to see this action launched yesterday.
You know, I just feel sad about it. I mean, it's easy to mock and make jokes and so forth, but look, you know, rugby needs to survive in Australia. New Zealand needs it to survive. It needs to survive on a world stage. We had Gordon Bray on the show yesterday, Geoff, about their wonderful book about Rugby Immortals. And look, I could have talked to him for 5 hours about it. And I know that you know Gordy too. And just going through some of the names and the history and that. And it's quick and easy to forget how good Australia have been in the past. They were the first to win 2 World Cups in a decade. Let's not forget that, okay? 91 and 99. And so to have the sport being so divided, but also the financial cost as much as every other cost that it's going to put on it, you know, and then I see names like Daniel Herbert involved and his name calling, and I just think, God damn, you know, you just wish somebody could go in and go, look, okay, what's the ultimate outcome that everyone wants here? Surely it's for the best for the sport to survive and thrive in Australia. If we start from that point and work backwards and work out how we can get to that point, would that be a good place to start if you and me were sitting in a room together?
Absolutely, and that's what should have happened, and for different reasons it didn't happen that way. But no, there's no doubt about that. And one of the people that features in the book is a guy called Rob Clark, who ran the Rebels in the early years. He's also been the CEO of the Brumbies, and he was a chief operating officer for Rugby Australia, and then stepped in as interim CEO while they were trying to find a replacement after COVID and needed, you know, to sort their finances out. So he's a real establishment guy, and the main message that he had, you know, behind all of this was that, you know, that's exactly what you're saying, Marty. If he was there, and in the times that he has been there, these people would have sat down and sorted this out because they've all got the best interests of rugby at heart. But unfortunately, what's happened here, and a little bit in New Zealand as well, we've sort of had this corporatisation of the running of the game, and we've had boards that are more corporate in nature and less rugby in nature. And you get some of that too, right? We can't have the old amateur, you know, guys that have been on a committee for years, you know, wending their way into running a fully professional commercial operation. So there needs to be a bit of that. But it's gone too much the other way. And so what happened last year after Hamish McLennan was basically run out of town, with, you know, he invested everything in a failed World Cup bid with Eddie Jones.
It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin on the platform. Brought to you by One New Zealand. Let's get connected.